Think of your favorite childhood fairy tale. You probably picture true love's kiss, a few helpful talking animals, and a guaranteed happily ever after. We owe a lot of those cozy, innocent vibes to the mid-20th century corporate sanitization machine. When folks like Walt Disney packaged these narratives, they polished off the rough edges to make them strictly family-friendly. But these stories were never meant to be read at bedtime. The tales we grew up with are actually reverse-engineered from terrifying, highly violent adult folklore. For centuries, generations of translators, writers, and editors took the original texts and methodically scrubbed them clean. They systematically erased the deeply unsettling realities hiding in the source material. To find the reality behind these fables, we have to examine the specific mechanics of the early texts and see exactly what society felt compelled to hide. Let's look at Sleeping Beauty. The earliest documented version comes from 17th century Italian writer Giambattista Basile, who titled his tale Sun, Moon, and Talia. Basile compiled these stories within the stark, gritty reality of 17th century Naples, ensuring his folklore mirrored that unforgiving environment. When the prince finds Talia unconscious in this version, there is no gentle, curse-breaking kiss. Instead, he assaults her while she remains entirely comatose. The medical aftermath is just as grim. Still unconscious, the princess gives birth to twins. She only finally wakes up when one of the starving infants accidentally sucks the poisoned splinter right out of her finger. The editors of the era actively retrofitted romance into these stories to mask that kind of trauma. Take the Frog Prince. The famous kiss magically transforming the frog into a royal was entirely invented by English translators to make the story palatable for children. In the original Grimm Brothers version, the princess breaks the curse by violently hurling the amphibian against a stone wall with all her might. Romance, in the hands of early editors, was a tool. They weaponized the magical kiss concept to paper over acts of severe assault and physical violence, shielding young readers from the brutal realities of the era. This chart illustrates the surgical removal of visceral body horror from Snow White. In the original folklore, the evil queen didn't just ask the huntsman for the young girl's heart. She specifically demanded Snow White's lungs and liver to be brought back as proof. Once the heavy anatomical gore was stripped away, adapters had room to artificially inject a heavy dose of cuteness into the bleak narrative. For hundreds of years, the seven dwarfs were completely anonymous. They lacked individual identities entirely until the 1937 Disney animated film finally gave them names like Doc, Grumpy, and Dopey. Removing the organs and adding goofy sidekicks surgically shifted the genre away from physical body horror, replacing visceral fear with a simple moral lesson. But maybe the starkest example of softening these stories is Pinocchio. Carlo Collodi's 1880s original is a bleak cautionary tale, written with a level of horror far removed from any whimsical adventure. The original wooden puppet is highly sociopathic. When the talking cricket tries to give him some advice, Pinocchio gets annoyed and immediately beats the insect to death with a hammer. The karma for his behavior is immediate and deeply visceral. In one chapter, he falls asleep near a hot stove and accidentally burns both of his wooden feet completely off. And when Pinocchio naively trusts a pair of con artists telling him he can grow a tree out of gold coins, he pays the ultimate price. The furious townspeople form a mob, lynch the boy, and hang him from an oak tree. Collodi actually wrote that hanging as the definitive end of the book. He wanted a brutal warning about disobedience. But his editor intervened and forced him to append a happy ending, introducing the blue fairy to magically resurrect the puppet. This editorial mandate highlights a growing cultural shift toward the promise of redemption, signaling a new preference for shielding children from fatal consequences. The fairy tales we consume today are essentially highly censored cover songs, completely stripped of their original teeth. Back in the 1600s and 1800s, these stories had a very specific function. They were grim, pedagogical survival tools, engineered to enforce strict obedience in an incredibly unforgiving world. This timeline illustrates that shift. It contrasts the 17th century survival model of youth, where kids faced harsh environmental inputs every day, against the protected model that emerged in the 20th century. We now view childhood as a fragile state of being. We built this conceptual bubble to actively repel the realities of gore, physical assault, and fatal consequences that used to be standard reading material. The monsters and the dark realities never actually left our foundational myths. We just chose to blindfold the audience, bearing the original text to invent and fiercely protect the modern concept of childhood innocence.